Ladies and gentlemen, I take pride in introducing the greatest show on earth.
Hi, everybody. This is Scott Gordon. Welcome to the Uncle Floyd Podcast, number 59. And we're going to do something a little different today. I've got a special guest, and here he is right now. You might know him as Artie Delmar. He's also known as David Burd. Hey, David.
Hey, Scott.
So, we were talking about a few things before we got started with this. And I think that first story we were telling was worthwhile. I'm facing some dental surgery, some oral surgery real soon. Going to have some implants put in. And you reminded me of a situation that happened a few years ago.
A few years ago, you were coming through the area with your wife, Diane, driving through the Poconos. And you called me and said, hey, you want to meet for lunch? We're going to be in your neighborhood. So we went to the Delaware Water Gap Diner. I ordered an omelet, and I broke a tooth eating an omelet.
How many people have ever broken a tooth eating an omelet?
Yeah, it was really crunchy, and I thought that's an unusual texture.
Oh, it was an omelet with the shells. Okay.
Yeah, right. What is this in my mouth? I spit out a tooth. So you were a witness to my poor dental work. And I've got dental surgery to look forward to, and false teeth and everything else.
Well, I found out with mine that you can't do physical comedy on stage where you have to deliver dialogue, and
right,
and wear a mouth guard, because you get you take lumps, you take impacts when you're doing something like that. And I had 5 cracked teeth that I did not know about.
Well, you have an excuse. All I did was chew. For 70 years I've been chewing, and now it's catching up with me.
Well, when you think about it, I chewed on the air.
Yeah, right.
It's a lot softer than an omelet with shells.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
so that's the story.
In Uncle Floyd Show history, in like 1980, 1981. We were working on the idea of becoming a syndicated show.
Yes. And
you had picked up another job at the same time that we were talking about it.
Yes.
And that job was to work for MTV.
So let me give you a little backstory. I was Viewer of the Week in 1976. So I was watching the Uncle Floyd Show. I wasn't on it. And at the time, I was working for an animation studio in New York, and appeared on the show a couple of times talking about cartoons and how cartoons are made and stuff like that. And I Artie Delmar ran for president, Artie in 80, and I didn't win. I guess that's not news to most people, but I did not win. And then it kind of came to a head. I was so disappointed for not winning that I left in 1981. No, that's not true at all. I didn't win, and I looked at my situation and realized I couldn't keep doing the Uncle Floyd Show because I couldn't make a living at it. I was doing it as a full-time job, still living with my parents, and I had to make a break and start a career that earned a living. So I left the Uncle Floyd Show. I think it was March of 81, maybe, and then started working for National Lampoon. I was writing for them and also doing photography, funny pictures. And then started doing work for the Movie Channel, which was owned by the same company that owned MTV. Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment Corporation. So that was a joint venture between Warner Brothers and American Express, of all people. Now, of course, Warner Brothers is being bought by Paramount Netflix.com or something. I can't keep track. But even back then, these conglomerates were in bed with each other. So Warner Amex had the Movie Channel, which was showing movies on TV, not unlike HBO. And then they launched MTV, so I was there at the beginning for that. I mean, before the beginning. I was there before they even started.
And you were doing animations and graphics and stuff like that for them, right?
Yeah, I did a couple of storyboards for the movie channel, 5 or 6. So these are animated station IDs, station identification, which is the little 10-second thing you see that says, "You're watching Me TV," that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I did them for the movie channel, and then later for MTV, working for the same group of people in the same office, but just two different channels, 2 different products.
So August 1st,
51. Yeah.
1981?
Yes.
August 1st, 1981 is when MTV went on the air.
It was pretty exciting. We knew that we were onto something. There was a palpable excitement, like we're breaking the ground. This is changing everything. We knew that even then, before it even hit the airwaves, or the cable waves, I should say. But it's important too. You have to put it in the context of the time. In 1981, most stations, the vast majority of them, signed off the air during the night. They didn't run for 24 hours like today. So if you were up at 3 in the morning, there was nothing on TV.
Oh yes, there was. It was the Indian head
right.
graphic with the circles
on a test pattern. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
They would play the Star Spangled Banner at 2:00 and say, CBS is signing off the air. See you tomorrow, and it was dark.
And all the rest of the night, it was like, woo.
Yeah, right. That was it.
So
MTV was 24 hours a day, which was a bit revolutionary. And it was a channel. I guess CNN was the first channel dedicated to just one thing. What they called narrowcasting versus broadcasting.
No, I think before CNN was the Weather Channel.
That's right in there. Yeah, somewhere in there where you just if you want weather, you go to the Weather Channel. If you want news, you go to CNN. And MTV was either second or third with, if you want music, we have it 24 hours. So a channel dedicated to only one thing that was on all day. And then the third aspect, which is all part of that very first MTV commercial that I did, was that it was in stereo. But not, what's the word, multiplexed? Not part of the television signal. So if you want, it sounds so ridiculous today, but if you wanted to hear MTV in stereo, you had to tune your FM receiver to a local radio station, which was simulcasting the audio
right
from MTV. So MTV would be on your cable box, channel 62 or something, and then the frequency 103.7 would be the audio. So you had to turn your radio on, have your speakers nearby, turn your TV on, and they would be in sync, and you could hear stereo music. And I still have the gadget. There was even a little gizmo that you had to use. A couple of pieces of coaxial cable, one of them plugged into your TV, the other plugged into the hi-fi and whatnot.
All right.
And of course,
now let's clear up one misconception that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
A lot of people say the first thing ever on MTV was Video Killed the Radio Star. It wasn't.
Oh, okay.
It was not. The first thing on MTV was the rocket ship ID.
Yes.
With the flags.
Right.
And you had something to do with those flags, didn't you?
That was not me. That was a company called Buzzco, Candy Kugel, Buzz Potemkin, and Candy Kugel did that. The idea there was we didn't have a whole lot of money. I mean, there was more money than the Uncle Floyd Show, but there wasn't a lot of budget. And somebody realized that the NASA footage is owned by we the people. It's government, so anyone can use it.
Uh-huh.
So they said, well, we got these 2 guys, we got a rocket ship taking off, we got 2 guys walking on the moon, and we can get that for free. So they did that, and then through the magic of animation, added the MTV flag. They used that for years. That was a long-running station ID, and I had nothing to do with it. That was a different department. I was in the creative services department, and that was done through, I believe, the on-air promotion department, Marcy Braffman.
Okay, now the second thing on MTV was a posterized video of Cyndi Lauper saying, "I want my MTV."
I don't think so.
Oh yeah, I remember it.
No, I'm gonna argue with that, because that wasn't shot until the TV commercial came out, which is the one I did the voice on. It was I want to say Les Garland. I think that was the guy's name, who was an executive, but a lot of the people who worked at MTV had come from radio. And Les Garland says something like, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll," something to that effect. And then you get the rocket ship taking off and the guys bouncing on the moon. But then the TV commercial I'm talking about, which didn't run on MTV, it ran on commercial television, broadcast television stations. That's the one where I say, "MTV, video music 24 hours a day, and it's stereo." I've been doing it at parties ever since. So that was an ad that they paid to run, that came up with from the ad agency. They paid to run it on, ABC, CBS, and the idea was call your local cable company and demand MTV, which was a switch, I'm sure you remember this, on the Marky Mapo commercials.
Exactly.
Marky Ramone was named after Marky Mapo. A little bit of trivia. But the idea was that you would drive distribution through consumer demand, which they teach in business school is impossible, but they did it. So the idea was you had to say, "I want my Mapo." And you go into your grocery store and say, "I want my Mapo, I want my Mapo." You just get on their nerves until they finally say, fine, we'll order Mapo. Maple flavored, what was it, like oatmeal or something? A maple flavored oatmeal?
Well, the whole idea behind that is that you drum it into the consumer's head so much that that's all they can think of.
Yeah.
Which was the entire idea behind the Mr. Whipple commercials.
Right, yeah, it's the same kind of thing, but this was literally the same guy. George Lois was the ad executive who came up with "I want my Mapo," and then later "I want my MTV." It was a recycled idea, but it was call your local cable company and demand your MTV.
You see, that advertising is just like comedy. You recycle the jokes, you recycle the ads.
You recycle the good ones. You don't recycle the duds, but yeah, so it worked for Mapo, and he said, "Hey, let's use that again." George Lois is the guy who is kind of the Don Draper character in Mad Men, the quintessential advertising guy, the legendary George Lois. He's the one who would stand on the windowsill and threaten to jump if the client didn't buy his idea, So it was an interesting time.
And you were not in the actual MTV offices per se, right?
I was, but it was a few floors. I can't remember now if I was on the 20th floor and the studio was on the 21st or something like that.
Well, I'm sure there was very limited interaction between you guys, the creative guys, and the VJs.
Oh yeah, I did one thing with Martha Quinn, which in the recording studio. One thing, some voiceover thing. I remember meeting her, and she was very nice, and we did that. But no, I didn't bump into VJs. Once in a while in the elevator, you'd see somebody famous, rock stars, so forth. But we were pretty much, on our own in our offices, which were not very. Well, New York City office building. It wasn't very rock and roll.
I'm sure a lot of the rock stars, knowing some of the rock stars I've met in my time, would get on the elevator and not know which floor to get off on. And that's why they ended up in your office.
Yeah, that's probably true. No, but people would be in the lobby, or you'd see them coming up and down. But it wasn't like a star-studded event, not where I was. Although I got involved in some of their promotions, that involved rock stars. But I was already used to that from the Uncle Floyd Show. It wasn't new to me because we had a lot of those same people as guests, as music guests.
Right, and you booked a lot of them.
Exactly. Very good. And for example, we did this thing, I want to call it MTV Rock School or something like that. They came up with an idea for this contest, sweepstakes technically, where people would write in and enter. And then you win a trip to New York City, you get to stay in a hotel, and you go to school with rock stars for teachers. So, 30 kids, whatever it was, 35 winners, won this trip. And they had put together a curriculum of rock stars and the subjects that they would teach. So, Sammy Hagar had a hit with I Can't Drive 55. So they made him in charge of driver's ed. It was like that. And I want to say Glenn Fry was music appreciation from the Eagles. And then Dee Snider, who was the leader of Twisted Sister, he did heavy metal shop. So it's all, clever stuff like that.
I just wonder if they had Brian May, what he would have taught.
Yeah. Well, one of them was the Ramones, Joey, and at that time Richie was the drummer, and they came in, and I forget what their course was supposed to be. But each of these people had a 45-minute or an hour to talk to the kids and whatnot.
I guess most of them turned into Q&As.
Yeah, there was a certain amount of that, and but I remember Dee Snider playing "Born to Be Wild" and saying, "This is the first heavy metal record. This is where the term heavy metal came from." And he, had a turntable and he was playing music, and the people couldn't have been better behaved. They were sitting there, just wrapped, their hands folded on the desk. They were loving it.
Absolute students.
Yeah, like they couldn't have been better students. The problem was, and naturally this is endemic to the Ramones, Joey was late and, wouldn't get out of bed, then he wouldn't get in the cab, or he wouldn't do this. So I don't know, they were like an hour late. So I had hired, maybe if I should mention his name, he'd probably get mad. I hired a guy to pretend to be the principal, who was not a musician. And he was just going to be there kind of like an MC in between the...
One of the stand-up guys?
No, it was just a guy that I knew. I hired him because he reminded me of Mr. Weatherby from Archie Comics.
Okay.
He kind of looked like that. So I thought, well, he'd be a good principal. It was typecasting. So his job was to say, okay, thank you very much, Dee Snider, and in a few minutes we're going to have Glenn Fry, and I want everybody to make sure they have their pencils sharpened and, fill time, 2-3 minutes. So Joey is like an hour late, and while the kids are waiting for their Ramones, I told him, go out there and do some time, kill some time. So he went in front of the class, says, all right, everybody, put your pencils down, no talking, no gum chewing. He started, well, he's vamping, and we're half an hour in, and he's telling these people not to chew gum. He's got nothing else. He has no script, no material, and the kids they're not chewing gum. They're well behaved. They couldn't be, and he's going around scolding, all right, students, be quiet, keep your heads down, pencils and paper. So finally, just to break up the monotony, I made a sign, a kick me sign, and put it on his back, and encouraged them to throw paper airplanes just so he'd have something to do. But this guy, I never saw anybody sweat like this. He vamped for an hour. Just, he was suffering. It was brutal. But finally the Ramones came, and of course they were great.
Well, it's a shame he wasn't a stand-up guy. He would have probably had him on the floor.
It might have been the best day of his career. This guy was from the comic book world.
Okay.
Did not have a good day. And the other thing about that experience was, so Sammy Hagar was there because he had a hit at the time, and he shows up with Eddie Van Halen. And I said, oh, what are you doing here? And he says, Sammy and I are thinking of doing, this is before they announced that David Lee Roth was leaving Van Halen,
right,
and Sammy Hagar was going to replace him. So I knew about that before anybody did, because these two showed up. I said, well, something's going on here, And he revealed that there were plans, changes in the offing. So things like that. It was a fun place to work, and I stayed at MTV as long as I was in New Jersey. I moved to Pennsylvania in 1990. So from 81 to 1990, I was still working there doing this or that, the other thing.
And
as a producer.
And one of the reasons why we're doing this is just on New Year's Eve. That's December 31st, 2025.
Right.
MTV shut down all the dedicated music stations worldwide.
Yes. Yes. I know. 44 years, right? So.
Yeah.
Not a bad run.
Another thing that the streaming services have killed.
Well, that's an interesting point. You talk about misconceptions. A lot of people to this day will say, oh, MTV was great in the beginning when it was just music, and they ruined it, But, of course, nobody in television makes a decision that isn't based on money. It's always a business decision.
Absolutely.
They didn't get rid of the music videos because they wanted to make your life unpleasant. They did it because they couldn't sustain that business model. In the beginning, record companies were making these promotional videos to try to sell records, which were vinyl at that time.
Right.
And then that had CDs yet. And you'd go in a record store. I remember going to Sam Goody up in your neck of the woods in Paramus, and there was a TV and some sort of playback unit, VHS, and they were playing Elvis Costello music videos. So the people would say, oh, I'm going to buy that album. And where is it? Over here under E, or C. So somebody at MTV, they say Mike Nesmith, although I never heard his name mentioned when I was working there. Supposedly he came up with the idea and pitched it to them, but I never can tell if that's true or if it's partly true. Bob Pittman was the guy I worked for. So somebody, Bob Pittman or Mike Nesmith, said, hey, these videos exist, and the record companies love exposure. They want them to be seen. What if we put them on a channel dedicated to just nothing but music videos? Which is great because you're getting the content for free. How can you miss? Other, conventional terrestrial broadcasters had to pay good money for a sitcom or an adventure show or a cop show or something. This was free programming that you could charge people to watch. I mean, and the record companies loved it because they were getting the exposure they wanted. It's a win-win.
I can picture the bean counters talking with the lawyers, trying to figure out if we ask the record companies to pay us to put their stuff on. Is that under the
right.
payola laws?
Right. Well, I guess if they gave you the stuff for free and you put it on for free, then there was no problem. If the record companies were saying, hey, MTV, play this video, we'll give you some money or a bag of cocaine or something, then you could say you're violating the
right. I knew a guy who was a record pusher. He used to go around to radio stations and give them the records. Here, this is one we think is going to be good. There, and he would just bring them in, but he'd bring in coffee and donuts when he came in.
Right.
And that was considered questionable. The coffee and donuts.
That was how Famous Amos got started with the chocolate chip cookies.
I ran into him in Ridgewood one day.
Oh, yeah?
I was outside of Victor's House of Music, and I saw him coming out of the grocery store that was there. And I looked at him. I recognized him right away. And I said, hey, Wally, good cookies. He said, come here, man. I walked over, and he gave me a case of his cookies out of his trunk.
Wow.
Which I couldn't eat a case of cookies myself. I took a couple of bags and gave the rest of it to a grammar school, Here, cookies.
Well, his job was to promote records, so he would go to radio stations and say, hey, just like you described, and he would bring them a batch of homemade cookies. And he got so well known for the cookies that he finally gave up the record promoting and started making his cookies and selling them. And, of course, I was working a lot at Columbia Records at the time, doing commercials for them and working with the late Marty Picar. And so, Famous Amos would be in the building, like, what have you got? Oh, we have this new act called Boston. Oh, give me a couple copies, But anyway, we're getting off the subject. Wait, why are we here? I forgot.
That's the point of it. Get off the subject and talk about lots of junk.
No, so MTV. So they had the programming came for free. They paid the VJs, not a whole lot, and they just said, "Hey, now here's a new video by such and such," and then they played the video. So it was a great business model. And when it first started out, they went to advertisers and said, "Look, we don't have ratings. We don't know we don't know how many people are watching, but we do know they're young, and we know they're in neighborhoods that can afford cable TV. So they're young, upwardly mobile, probably urban people, which is a very desirable audience for an advertiser."
Right.
But they couldn't point to the Nielsen ratings and say, "Okay, here we got a 6.2 or whatever it is." And that worked for a while. You know, the advertisers are like, "Yeah, we'll get it. We'll advertise Budweiser and Coca-Cola and whatnot." And then that worked up until the point where it didn't, and they tried to get Nielsen ratings. The problem being that Nielsen was set up for a half-hour clock, either a 1-hour show or a 30-minute show that
right.
people watched. And if you watched MTV and you saw the first song, you said, "Oh, that's a good song." And you saw the second song, that's 2. And you saw the third song, that's 3. So each of those is like 3 minutes. So now we're up to 9 minutes. Say, "Oh, let me watch one more." And then you see the fourth song, and then the fifth one that comes on, you say, "I'm not crazy about this. Let me change the station." So you're only getting credit for 12 minutes of viewing time, which
right.
wasn't enough to move the needle on the Nielsen box. So no matter how many people were watching, they were like coming up with 0. You know, nobody it wasn't being recorded as viewership. So MTV said we have to have half-hour and 1-hour programs. We can't have all this little bits of, this is 2 minutes, this is 3 minutes. It's got to be a half hour. And that's where Beavis and Butthead came in, and concerts and so forth, things where people would sit still and watch the whole show.
Right.
And once that happened, and the ratings were good, and profits were good, then the record company said, "Well, why are we giving you this stuff for free? We want to get paid for it." And that was the end of it. It just couldn't go on anymore without that, free free programming and getting advertisers for nothing. So the whole business model changed, and that's where Jersey Shore came in and all this other stuff. That and they figured, hey, if we're going to make our own shows, we can make whatever we want. So it hasn't really been music for a long time. Was it 5 years, maybe 6 years?
Well, they've had their music channels. They had their 80s and 90s things that hung around way up on the top of the cable chain. A lot of people don't realize that digital video came in not to save the airwaves, not to cut back on the airwave usage at the time, but to enable the cable companies to get the ratings.
Right.
Because if you have a digital cable box, you have an address, and they can read what your address is watching.
Can I tell a Muggsy story?
Go ahead.
So for a while, Muggsy had a job working it wasn't Best Buy. It was something like Best Buy, a local retailer, probably Bergen County, where they sold TVs and appliances and whatnot. And Muggsy worked in the TV department. And people would come in and say, "What TV should I buy?" "Oh, well, this Panasonic is nice, but the Sony has a really good picture. I kind of like the Sanyo," whatever he would do when he would sell televisions. So a woman comes in and she says, "I want to buy a TV." He says, "Oh, take a look at this Sony. Look at how crisp the colors are." And she says, No. I have to get a model that has picture-in-picture," which was a dubious technological achievement. The idea was you would be watching the ball game, but have the news on in the corner, in a little box in the corner of the screen, or vice versa. You're watching a movie, but you're keeping the ball game on the corner in case something important happens.
Right.
So you could watch 2 shows at once. I don't know if anybody ever actually did that, but that was the idea, PIP. And I think it was only Panasonic that offered that. So she says, no, it's got to be Panasonic. I got to get picture-in-picture. I'm not kidding. And Muggsy says, why do you need that? What are you going to do with that feature? You know? And she says, well, I just became a Nielsen household. And I want to watch, like, the glorious ladies of wrestling. But I don't want them to know that I have bad taste. So I'm going to put on PBS on the main screen and then watch wrestling on the little inset picture so that Nielsen thinks I'm educated and cultured. Which just takes the whole idea of Nielsen ratings and throws it into a cocked hat. It's like, well, if you can cheat, what's the point? But that's what she was doing. She was trying to cheat the Nielsen company and trick them into thinking she had class.
Well, that's the thing. With digital, you can't do that because they'll know you've got the two streams going.
Exactly.
So that's why they wanted digital. You know?
That's why they did it, and that's why Muggsy lost his job.
Well, no, Muggsy lost his job because they were telling him which ones to sell.
Probably, right.
And the high profit ones, and he wasn't selling them. I worked in retail long enough to know how that works.
Yeah.
You know, you have the models that you make the big money on, and you have the other ones which are the loss leaders that you have in there for, just to say, hey, we've got and you put a price on it, and then you show them your model, your house model, which has got a lower price and looks almost as good.
Right.
I got kicked out of a major audio retailer once because of the fact that I walked in and I wanted a specific speaker. As a matter of fact, it was JBL's 4408s, which are studio monitors.
Okay.
And the guy said, well, I'll play them for you. And he played them for me. And they sounded really thin and not much bass response and everything. Mm-hmm. And they have those switch boxes.
Yeah.
He says, well, listen to our Klarn brand. And he pressed the other button, and this bass and a large sound comes out of it. He says, and now listen to this. He pushes the JBL back, and it's thin and not much bass. I walked over and looked behind them, and they had the JBL speakers wired out of phase, which means one of the two speakers was wired with the positive to the negative terminal and the negative to the positive terminal.
Sure.
What that does is when you're in the room, the bass negates itself.
Right.
So it sounds cheap. And I caught him doing it, and I stood there and I said to the entire bunch of people who were there listening, I said, hey, I think we should leave here right now. These guys are cheating, and I'm pointing out the reason. They dragged me out of the store and threw me into the parking lot.
That's what I always used to do. I used to get the Hi-Fi magazines, Stereo Review, and all that kind of stuff. And they would do double-blind tests so that nobody knows which speaker you're listening to. You don't know. Even the test guy doesn't know, and the subject doesn't know, so you can't do that kind of cheating. But, yeah, in the store you could do anything.
Yeah, and that's what they did. They wanted to sell the ones that they made 80% profit on instead of the ones they made 10% profit on.
Right.
So,
do you remember our sponsor, Drucker's?
Drucker's, Sam Drucker.
Yeah, Sam Drucker from Green Acres was sponsored at the Uncle Floyd Show for a while. That was one of those discount, like a Crazy Eddie type, right?
Well, I went to his store a couple of times, and I found them to be absolutely honest. So,
wow,
that
better than Crazy Eddie.
That can be one of the facts why he didn't last as long, because he wasn't selling the high profit stuff.
Now, here's a fun fact.
Yeah.
The guy that we associate with Crazy Eddie is Dr. Jerry
Carroll.
And I bumped into him in the hall once at MTV. He took my account. He took that job away from me. He was much more of a professional announcer than me. I just got the job because I was the one closest to the microphone. But so I saw him and I said, hey, you took my job. And he said, well, who are you? I said, well, I do this thing where I scream into a microphone. He said, oh, wow, good luck, But they started using him at MTV. I guess they saw him on the Crazy Eddie commercials.
Well, either that or they heard him on the radio, because he was quite well known as a DJ.
Yes, of course.
So
A lot of those guys came out of radio, and now Bob Pittman, the guy who started MTV, he runs iHeartRadio, which is all radio, streaming service with remote radio stations. So he's still in the music business, even though MTV isn't.
well, guess what?
Time to go?
We've run way over our half hour.
Okay.
And, we'll keep it all in. Everybody will hear all of it and hear us complain about everybody else. And I just want to do a couple of really quick plugs. If hopefully next week I'll be able to get together with Uncle Floyd and do this. And we'll be able to answer some questions. So if you'd like to get your questions into us, just send them by email to ufpodcast@sge-inc.com. That's ufpodcast@sge-inc.com. And every Tuesday night at 8, we have a date. I run clips of the old Uncle Floyd Show, and you get to watch us do what we used to do. And I host it live. I answer your questions. A lot of times Dave is there answering questions as well. And we have a good time, get a few laughs, and it's about 45 minutes long. And you can get to that by going to theunclefloydshow.tv. That's theunclefloydshow.tv. And we'll see you next time. And Dave, hang on, and we'll talk a little more after this is over.
Okay.
And
I'll see you on Tuesday night.
And you'll see me on Tuesday night. As a matter of fact,
you won't see me, but I'll see you.
Oh no, you'll see Dave a couple of times this Tuesday coming up on January 6th. You'll see Dave. So.
Oh, this is the first time hearing about this. Very good.
So here we go. We're gonna leave you now, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
This program was produced in the studios of Scott Gordon Enterprises, Incorporated in Paramus, New Jersey.